YIMBY, yes I make bitches yawn. Yes I make bitches yawn. Let's talk about YIMBY versus NIMBY. First, what is YIMBY? YIMBYism is very much a neoliberal prescription to the affordable housing paradigm. It facilitates new options that are codified into law to address the lack of housing that is available, but it doesn't necessarily get down to the affordability epidemic. The affordable housing paradigm, mind you, came during the introduction of neoliberalism in the 1980s. It has taken off a little bit more specifically in the housing market because of the ongoing unaffordability or the lack of affordability in our privatized housing market, where most people are renting because affordable housing and what public housing is available, it's so few and far between, it's inaccessible. Only about a quarter of all eligible households actually receive affordable housing vouchers. And we only have a finite number of affordable housing units that are built every year with, you know, the LIHTC program, which is the low-income housing tax credit program, and then whatever is available at the local level that might go a little further in offering affordable housing. Again, very conditional. We have seen a lot of YIMBY policies introduced in state legislature here in California. What does a YIMBY law look like? Let's talk about SB 9. SB 9, also known as the California Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency or HOME Act, it is a state bill that requires cities allow one additional residential unit into parcels zoned for single-family dwelling units. So a single-family zoning area is typically an R1 zoned area, and this law went into effect this year, January 1st, 2022. Most residential areas or suburban areas, as we know them, they are zoned R1 or R2, which means that you can only build single-family homes in these areas. So what SB 9 does, it allows those plots of land that are zoned for single-family dwelling units to be retrofitted, or if it's barren land that has yet to be developed, you can, from that point, develop something that does not fit the general description of a single-family housing dwelling. Is this the most efficient? No. No, this is building 2 units on a plot of land instead of 1. Who can take advantage of SB 9 to add additional units to their properties? Only properties in the R1 or other local level zoning districts, like the Ocean property zone in Santa Monica, can take advantage of SB 9. Some exemptions are in place to make sure the new laws do not lead to displacement of existing residents. Important. Properties that meet any of the below cannot submit an SB 9 application. 1. Within certain hazard zones like earthquakes, faults, flood zones, and conservation land. Keep that in mind. Conservation land. Within a historic district or designated historic resource, contains an existing price-controlled unit, including deed restrictions and or rent control, underwent a certain Ellis Act removal previous 15 years, and will require the removal of more than 25% of existing structural walls. Obviously, this new law cannot impede any progress that we have made with building affordable housing that already exists, that's rent controlled, or has some sort of stipulation that is offering affordability. So no encroaching in those areas that have already addressed or have developed affordable housing for some residents. And also, you can't build in hazardous areas or areas of conservation. What exactly does SB 9 allow property owners to do, and how can I apply if you're looking to take advantage of this new law if you are a developer? There are 2 different pathways for applicants to add an additional unit to their property. 1, the construction of new units or 2 units on a single lot. This includes splitting an existing home into 2 units, so you can retrofit your home. You can turn your existing single-family home into a duplex if you want to. Or 2, the subdivision of 1 lot into 2 separate lots. So what this means, this is what I had brought up earlier. You can either take your existing structure that's already been built, you can renovate it into 2 separate units, or if you are buying a barren or an empty plot of land that is turning into a subdivision, you can at that time, from square one, from ground zero, build a duplex instead of a single family dwelling. SB9 process is similar to the existing development review process that is in place. Property owners will submit an SB9 specific application to a local planning office. The application will be reviewed to ensure the project complies with new state law, checking things like zoning and development standards, like whether or not you can build in this area, and whether or not it is a conservation area. Then once the SB9 application is approved by the city, the property owner goes through the normal plan review and building permit process, which does require you to meet all building code standards. That includes hazards, that includes your run-of-the-mill safety and health code standards. Just wanted to give a very quick, brief analysis on what SB9 is, so that we move into the details of the story that I wanted to go over. A Woodside Reserves housing decision that was made by the Attorney General because of their claim that their very expensive suburban enclave was a mountain lion sanctuary. So what this neighborhood attempted to do was claim that it was a conservation area for mountain lion preservation in order to stop applications using this new SB9 standard that recently went into effect. This, of course, got a little bit of attention. I'm going to briefly read through it. The town of Woodside, this is in California, of course, announced Sunday that it won't deny applications under a new affordable housing law. We're going to talk about this affordable housing component as well. This announcement came after California Attorney General Rob Bonta sent a letter to Woodside town officials earlier Sunday warning that their effort to declare the town to be a mountain lion habitat was an attempt to avoid complying with the state's newly enacted affordable housing law. These people are, by all intents and purposes, the NIMBYs in this story, of course. But let's get more into it. An entire town cannot be declared habitat for a protected species, Bonta wrote in the letter. There is no valid basis to claim that the entire town of Woodside is a habitat for mountain lions. According to public documents posted by Woodside's planning department website, the town believed that because the State Fish and Game Commission lists mountain lion as an endangered species, no parcel in the town was eligible for Senate Bill 9 project, which started January 1st, made it legal for property owners to split, making it legal to split single-family lots into smaller sizes. Woodside said those lot sizes at 1,200 square feet would be smaller than minimum lot sizes and required by the town's zoning rules. In a press release, Attorney General's office said the mountain lion habitat claim is contrary to the law and contrary to efforts to alleviate the state's affordable housing issues. In Woodside, small houses are currently listed for sale on Zillow at $1 million and up. A one-bedroom apartment rent is about $2,500 a month, so keep that in mind as well. My message to Woodside is simple. Act in good faith, follow the law, and do your part to increase the housing supply. If you don't, my office won't stand idly by. Specifically, the letter states that there is no valid basis to claim that the entire town of Woodside is a habitat for mountain lions. Habitat is land that has the capacity to support specific species, including providing food and shelter. Land that is already developed with, for example, a single-family home is not by definition a habitat. Any exemption under SB 9 requires the town to examine the attributes to an individual parcel of land. An entire town cannot be declared habitat for a protected species. The exemption of a specific lot would have to be based on substantial evidence. Hours after the Bonta's memo, town officials held a meeting and decided to reverse the policy. So this was a decision made by the entire town, like the city officials in this town. They tried to claim this status to preemptively keep any developers from using this newly enacted SB 9 bill that would allow duplexes to be built in historically restricted areas that are usually exclusionary anyway. So here's a little bit more information about this particular neighborhood. The actions taken by the town have riled up critics and activists who say that it's a blatant attempt by the rich to evade the law and keep affordable housing scarce in a state that is in the middle of a homelessness crisis. This is absurd, Laura Foote, executive director of YIMBY Action, a housing activist group, told the San Francisco Chronicle. It's an example of the extreme, absurd lengths city will come up with to evade SB 9. Foote pointed out that the town of Woodside allowed Larry Ellison to build a $70 million, 23-acre, 10-building compound modeled after a 16th century Japanese emperor's palace, while banning 2-unit home conversions on already developed land. You can build a McMansion, and that somehow won't hurt the mountain lion, Foote told the Chronicle. But if you build 2 units, the lions will somehow fall over and die. The average value of a Woodside home is $4,458,459, over 6 times as high as the California median of $734,612, and the median annual income is over $250,000 according to Census Bureau data. Home prices in the town rose by about 15% in value over the last year. Woodside is 85% white according to census data. Residents used evidence of seeing the big cats on their home security cameras to back their decision to designate it as a mountain lion preserve, but others thought the sudden designation seemed suspicious. I once saw a mountain lion at the zoo in Oakland, but not here. Not here, never, Woodside resident Vanessa Nall, who's lived in the community for over 11 years, told her local ABC news station. If anyone else comes into the city and doesn't belong to these picky groups, they are really rude, these people. The Mountain Lion Foundation said that while Woodside does abut and contain a mountain lion habitat, mountain lions don't typically hang out on mowed lawns and suburban stretches. A blanket prohibition against adding an additional unit on an already developed parcel anywhere in town is neither required by the California Endangered Species Act nor contributing to the protection of mountain lions, the conservation nonprofit wrote in a statement. This is just really good NIMBY on YIMBY action that was going on here in California, in this particular part of California. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared the state in a housing crisis, and an estimated 150,000 homeless Californians are sleeping in shelters or on the streets. There are 7.1 million Californians living in poverty. When housing costs are taken into account, more than half of low-income Californians devote at least half of their paycheck to rents. The housing affordability crisis is undermining the California dream for families across the state and threatens our long-term growth and prosperity, Newsom said in a statement about SB 9. Making a meaningful impact on the crisis will take bold investments, strong collaboration across sectors, and political courage from our leaders and communities to do the right thing and build housing for all. Woodside is far from the only town that has attempted to come up with creative ways to block the statewide rezoning law. Since its introduction last year, local governments and homeowner groups have opposed the plan, claiming that it crushes single-family zoning. Won't anyone think of the single-family zoning that was literally created to maintain segregation once Jim Crow laws were nullified, to keep people separate along racial lines? I mean, won't anyone think about the racist legacy and the exclusionary legacy of single-family zoning? Please. There have been at least 40 cases in which towns attempted to block or limit SB 9 housing, according to affordable housing activist groups Yes in My Backyard Law. Let's think about this. Do you really think that this new law that was recently enacted is going to give affordable housing options for low-income families in this very, very affluent neighborhood where the costs of home reaches $5 million? This is why YIMBYism is a fucking joke, and it serves the neoliberal shills and the yuppies who are looking to find a way to increase building and development that suits them and their needs because they have the ability to afford new housing in these really expensive parts of town. Mind you, a one-bedroom apartment in this area tends to go for $2,500 a month. This is not going to be giving lower income families an opportunity for housing in these really expensive parts of town where the people are obviously very snooty, very rich, very asshole-ish. Why would low-income families even feel comfortable living in these areas? These duplex apartments are not built for lower income folk. But let me reiterate, SB 9 is not going to be the end-all be-all policy that starts to really address the lack of affordable housing options in a given area. Building more housing set at market rate does not address the affordability epidemic at all. That's why YIMBYism is not the policy prescription to address the affordability crisis here in California. I found a very good article that further breaks this down. It is a blog from Housing is a Human Right, and we're going to read this as well so that we really drive this point home. What is a YIMBY? A hint, it's not good. Okay, also, this is the quintessential YIMBY. This is a YIMBY protest in San Francisco. All right, this is what your run-of-the-mill YIMBY looks like. Let's talk a little bit of shit. We know NIMBYs are fucking awful, okay? We know YIMBYs are the fucking worst. Let's talk about how YIMBYs aren't so much better either. All right? Maybe you've read an article about YIMBYs or heard a friend mention the term, or maybe you saw something on Twitter, but still don't understand what YIMBYs are. No problem. Here's the lowdown. To start off, Housing is a Human Right and has been battling YIMBYs for years, so you've come to the right place for more information. In fact, we published a special report about that last year inside Game California YIMBYs, Scott Wiener's Big Tech's Troubling Housing Push. It's a must-read. Check it out. In the meantime, here are 7 takeaways with lots of links for more reading. Takeaway number 1. YIMBY stands for Yes in My Backyard. It's a clever twist on NIMBY, not in my backyard. NIMBYs have a controversial reputation for fighting new development in their communities. YIMBYs try to capitalize on that by using a moniker that sounds inclusive and appealing. Don't be fooled. Oh, don't worry about it. We won't. Takeaway number 2. In California, in 2017, YIMBYs started getting tons of press coverage. The Guardian described them as angry millennials who were fed up with the housing affordability crisis. I would take it one step further and say angry yuppie millennials. But they were solely concerned about themselves and their predicament. That's why I think it's important to say angry yuppie millennials, not lower income people. Always remember that. Housing policy in California has been a disaster for young people for decades. California YIMBY CEO Brian Hanlon told the Orange County Register in 2017, "It's gotten so bad that middle-class young people say there's no future for me in California if we don't get these housing costs under control. In order to do that, we need to build much more housing." Takeaway number 3. The problem YIMBYs believed was that a housing shortage was driving up rent prices. They rarely, if ever, talked about the corporate landlords charging outrageous rents, or that developers were demolishing rent-controlled apartments to build market-rate luxury housing, or that local and state governments needed to build more affordable housing and preserve already existing affordable housing stock, such as rent-controlled apartments. Also, let's talk about what we do know in places in San Francisco, who right now could see a referendum in the next election that is applying a vacancy tax. Why? Because there are currently 40,000 empty units in San Francisco and a little less than 10,000 individuals experiencing homelessness. So, whenever you have vacancies outweighing unhoused individuals 3-to-1, well then, it kind of seems as though it's not necessarily a shortage of housing, it is a shortage of affordability that we're talking about. in which case you can use government intervention to find a way to incentivize reducing rates or applying rent control standards with no workarounds, with no loopholes, and no opportunities for landlords to try to weasel their fucking way out of it, because we know, based on the Ellis Act, that they will. They will. The Ellis Act is your go-to provision that allows landlords to get out of their rent-controlled contracts by converting rentals into owner-occupied units, and that has been a very common practice in California. So, let's get back to this. YIMBY's simplicity concluded that housing market needed to be flooded with more apartments, and that would ultimately drive down rents. They knew developers built almost exclusively luxury housing, and that was okay with them. YIMBYs insisted that more luxury housing would solve California's housing affordability crisis. From the get-go, YIMBYs embraced trickle-down economics, or what's called trickle-down housing policy, as middle and working-class people have long known trickle-down anything doesn't work except to make the rich richer. Takeaway number 4. YIMBYs in the Bay Area in Southern California then started to push for deregulation of land use protections so developers could build, no matter who got hurt. Developers in return loved YIMBYs because killing land use protections would allow them to construct luxury housing anywhere, especially in working-class neighborhoods and communities of color, where land is often cheaper to buy and make massive profits. Housing justice activists fought back, knowing that deregulation and more luxury housing in working-class communities would lead to gentrification, and less affluent residents would be forced out of their long-time houses. As a result, YIMBYs are known to bully people on Twitter and use aggressive tactics, continually clash with housing justice and tenant rights activists. It wasn't pretty. In 2018, for example, Maria Zamudio, a Bay Area activist, told In These Times, quotes, "They're like, just build housing, you stupid brown people. I moved here last week and I need a place to live," end quote. Another Bay Area activist told Shelterforce in 2019 that interactions with YIMBYs has been absolutely ugly. A really nasty 3 years. Co-director of the San Francisco-based Council of Community Housing Organizations, Fernando Marti, wrote in 2019 Shelterforce column, "According to YIMBY leaders, now we equity activists have the problem too. Little different from the NIMBYs, rabid progressives who are too naive or too ideological to understand how the housing market really works. In the storyline, in the name of fighting evictions and displacement, we progressives, we communities of color, we poor people and immigrants, we working class queers stupidly don't realize that luxury development now will eventually become the affordable housing of the future. It's simple supply and demand, they say. Econ 101, and we obviously didn't go to college if we don't understand that simple truth." Takeaway number 5. As one can guess, YIMBYs are not housing justice activists. That's super important and must be repeated. YIMBYs are not housing justice activists, but for political reasons, YIMBYs are desperate to own housing justice credentials. What happened was the California YIMBY CEO Brian Hanlon helped draft a statewide land use deregulation bill called SB 827. It was carried by State Senator Scott Wiener, who was considered the king YIMBY in Sacramento, and SB 827 was championed by big real estate and big tech. The housing justice movement, including housing as a human right, strongly opposed the bill. For housing justice activists, SB 827 was another trickle-down solution that would unleash luxury housing developers in working-class communities, trigger higher rents, fuel gentrification, and push hard-working people out of their homes. In the end, the politicians listened, and the housing justice movement stopped the harmful bill. In 2020, housing justice activists defeated the follow-up to SB 827 called SB 50, which California YIMBY, the well-funded, statewide leader of YIMBY movement in California, tried to pass with Wiener's help. Once again, activists concerned about gentrification, developer giveaways, and shoving lower-income residents out of their neighborhoods helped kill the bill. It was another big defeat, and YIMBYs realized they had a major political problem. Housing justice issues kept getting in their way. YIMBYs needed to switch things up, and they needed to come across more like housing justice activists. In a flash, YIMBY started to co-opt messaging from the housing justice movement and tried to join housing justice coalitions. It's a strategy that continues to this day. It is time. It is time that I confess. I too fell victim to some of this messaging, this co-optedness. Because before I knew about FIMBYism, I thought that YIMBYism was a great idea. Little did I know what the YIMBYs were really trying to do. I admit to being a baby leftist. I don't know, like, I'm like doing full-blown confession, like I'm talking to the fucking, like I'm in the Vatican talking to like the fucking Pope. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Especially in New Mexico, there was like, not a lot of FIMBY talk. And you know, it just goes to show that YIMBYs are not just neoliberal shills who are looking to only serve their own needs or interests, or young, professional neoliberals who want to have better housing conditions for themselves and don't really care that the trickle-down components of their analysis does not work. They're only looking to satiate their own needs for housing and no one else. Building new housing does not have a trickle-down effect on the price of housing in lower-income areas. We don't need to continue to make this argument. We already know that it's simply not true. I wanted to go ahead and take that moment to confess, but let's get back to it. Yet, when the housing justice movement tried to repeal statewide restrictions on rent control through the ballot measure called Proposition 10 in 2018, California YIMBY refused to endorse and effectively stood with the real estate industry. Big Real Estate won that battle by spending more than $77 million in campaign cash to stop the initiative. The same thing happened in 2020. The housing justice movement tried to reform, rather than repeal, statewide restrictions on rent control through another ballot measure, Prop 21. Big Real Estate would spend nearly $100 million to successfully defeat the initiative. But California YIMBY still sat on the sidelines. It wouldn't endorse and refused to help the housing justice movement. In two of the most important housing justice battles in recent history, California YIMBY tacitly backed Big Real Estate. Takeaway number 6. YIMBYs are not going away. Despite their pro-gentrification agenda and clashes with housing justice activists, which includes shocking intimidation tactics at a 2018 protest in San Francisco that sent an elderly Asian woman to the hospital, many Democratic politicians champion YIMBYism and the mainstream media too often touts the YIMBY cause. Why? Politicians take huge amounts of campaign cash from real estate industries, and YIMBYism gives them political cover to deregulate land use protections and allow developers to build more luxury housing and to generate huge profits under the guise of solving the affordability crisis. As for the mainstream media, it appears that many reporters have bought into the harmful trickle-down housing agenda. And if working-class residents have to suffer, so be it. Takeaway number 7. YIMBYs routinely fail to consider the economic, social, cultural, and political impacts of their land use policies on working-class neighborhoods and communities of color. It's a clear years-long battle shown by bills YIMBYs have supported, including SB 827 in 2018, SB 50 in 2020, and SB 9 and SB 10 in 2021. The YIMBY movement has a white privilege problem. Nanya Lawyer, a policy advocate with the Western Center in law and poverty, told the LA Times. I don't think they recognize it. They don't understand poverty. They don't understand what that's like, who our clients really are, and what their lived experiences are. I will go a step further and say, I think that they do. They just don't care. I think that a generational gap is what makes a YIMBY, makes the distinction between a YIMBY and a NIMBY. A YIMBY might be a younger, professional city dweller who wants to have very nice housing accommodations that they can afford because they are doing quite well. I would go so far to say that YIMBYism is also an exclusionary practice where these younger neoliberal shills are looking to separate themselves from lower income folk that they might be sharing space with because they want to live in an area where their material conditions are ever present based on what they can afford. The purchasing power that they hold allows them to also alienate themselves from other lower income renters because a lot of YIMBYs are, of course, higher income earners who are looking to rent. So this could be fortifying that segregation between high income tenants and low income tenants. That is no more exclusionary than the NIMBYs who are keeping new construction from entering their area to diversify their neighborhoods. There's no real difference. It's self-serving, it's highly problematic, it's just another flavor of exclusionary practices that we have seen time and time again through NIMBYism. That's what I think. So I do think that they know. I think that they are very familiar with their exclusionary practices. They just co-opted that language from housing justice activists and leftists who are touting NIMBYism to try to further their own political point without sounding as dickish as the NIMBYs. That's my 2 cents. Anyway, to sum it up, YIMBYs started with the self-serving agenda. There you go. To force the production of more luxury housing that they could live in no matter the consequences to working class communities. To further their agenda, YIMBYs co-opt housing justice messaging, and they are not housing justice activists. In fact, they have a long, disturbing history of clashing with housing justice movements. YIMBYs push pro-gentrification, trickle-down housing policies that generate obscene profits for big real estate, and they've continually ignored the negative impacts of their policies on working-class residents. YIMBYs are not going away if politicians continue to support them. YIMBYs, put simply, are bad news. This was an excellent blog from Housing is a Human Right. Everyone please follow them and show them a little love. Doing great work. Patrick Range McDonald is an award-winning advocacy journalist who wrote this piece, so if you want to follow them, I would highly suggest it. I hope that this provides context for what SB 9 is really accomplishing. It is not necessarily to build affordable housing options, it is building more housing stock, but those who are entering these newly constructed homes, they aren't lower income individuals and families, they are YIMBYs who are looking to satiate their own needs or their own wants for nicer housing in areas that they can afford, nothing more.